And we still have a couple minutes before we need to go live.
No, that's excellent. I'm excited about our discussion today. It should be fun.
Yes, it's rare that we have one where we really need to be up to the minute in our news.
Literally. So welcome, Lisa and Victor. It's good to see you guys again.
Thank you for joining us, guys. We'll wait another 30, 45 seconds and see who else joins. But thanks for coming. Hi. An exciting day.
I like that. Good noon day to you.
Yes, exciting the way, say, like a visit to the dentist or.
Yeah. It is. It was a late evening last night, and my bedtime, I will be honest, I'm lucky if I'm up at 8:30 or 9 p.m. Like I'm a morning bird, and so of course I stayed up late last night, and then of course I woke up early this morning. So.
Yeah, I'm usually up pretty late on our household schedule, and then kind of get up early anyway, which is not the best.
Right.
What'd you say, Vic? Yeah, dental metaphor for the election.
Yeah. It's 12:01.
12:01. Yeah.
Let's get going.
All right. So welcome. This is Powering the Pandemic Pivot for Wednesday, November 4th. Welcome to our bi-weekly webinar intended expressly for entrepreneurs and the businesses they run and what's going on to help you power through and succeed despite the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, be they communicable diseases or communicating politicians. Welcome. I'm Jason Meyer of Meyer Business Law, a law firm based in Princeton, dedicated expressly to entrepreneurs and their businesses and their legal needs, especially things like formation and commercial needs. And with me, as always, is Aisha Hamilton of the self-named Hamilton Law Firm. And Aisha is all about the employee-employment relationship and the law that turns around that, and to champion for employees and for the employers who are lucky enough to have the good sense to call her for help. Hi, Aisha. Good to see you.
Jason, good to see you.
Our core topic for today is going to be to talk about last night's election. And yes, we could pontificate and engage in punditry and talk about winners and losers in politics, but that is not our job. Our job is to talk to you who are here, who have your own small businesses, who are wondering not so much about the politics, but about the business side of this. What is this going to mean to my business? What do I do? What do I not do? It is early yet, as we will get into. As of this hour, noon on Wednesday, the day after Election Day, a winner has not been declared, except by one of the candidates declaring himself, but the system does not work that way. So officially, we do not have a winner in the presidential election. The Senate is not yet decided as of this hour, although the winds are blowing to likely Republicans maintaining control of the Senate and Democrats maintaining control of the House. So we're going to take that situation as it lies. First, what would 45 minutes with two lawyers be without a disclaimer? Let me remind you, please, that all of the information and content and good stuff we're about to share on this webinar is for your general information and educational purposes only. We're not giving professional advice. This is not the same as a professional relationship. To do that, you have to call us and make us officially your counsel. Otherwise, this is all general stuff. Don't take it as specific information for you. And the other thing before we start off, Aisha, is we always spend a few minutes talking about current events, especially focused here on small businesses in New Jersey. The big current event is the election, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's peel away from presidential and congressional politics for a minute and look at some other news. And there was other ballot news yesterday that was a resounding win that does affect New Jersey businesses, right?
Yeah. So, And before we peel away from the presidential election, I just want to let all of you out there who were wondering about Kanye West's numbers. He did officially concede the election last night. So be rest assured that now we're only really talking about two candidates. The big win depends on how you look at it, but New Jersey passed its marijuana legalization bill. So overwhelmingly, with overwhelming support, this legislative action has now been approved and will become law in New Jersey. So the things to think about with that are going to be manyfold, right? Now that marijuana is legalized for generalized use, not just prescription use, you're really, as employers and as employees, really going to have to figure out how that works in the context of the workplace. Are you treating it as a prescription drug under the ADA? Are you treating it as just a substance, right? In the context of substance abuse, as you would alcohol or other medications, other drugs, over-the-counter stuff. The Department of Transportation had recently released guidance that says if you're using CBD products, the cannabinoid oil products, that might also result in a positive test on a marijuana employment test. And so you have to start thinking about that whole poppy seed muffin panic, right? Of, how am I in an industry, say a commercial truck driver, where I have a CDL license, and now, is that industry going to be impacted by the legalization of marijuana and what's acceptable and is not acceptable? And also there are employers I know that I represent who have very clear ideas of what is acceptable and not acceptable in their workplace, much like alcohol use may not be acceptable in your workplace. In fact, I had a client who is a dentist's office, and he said one of the dental techs would come into work perfectly able to do her job, but visibly and very clearly smelling of alcohol. And so there's that whole conversation about functioning alcoholics and functioning under the influence of marijuana that you're now going to start to address.
With two fascinating overlays, one of which is alcohol is generally not prescribed by healthcare professionals as a way to deal with physical or mental conditions, whereas marijuana and byproducts are. And alcohol
maybe now, right? Maybe that because of the legalization and the decriminalization of marijuana usage, you are no longer required to demonstrate that you have a prescription to use it. So it opens.
And then the other door, which is fascinating, and we're only going to crack this door here, but in a future webinar, we probably will delve more deeply into this, because it is a Pandora's box. But the other window to open is, unlike alcohol and a variety of other things, marijuana is still illegal under federal law. It's still, you're still not supposed to have it. And so you have something that's legal in the States, it's not legal federally, difficult to use credit cards for it. It affects how you fill out government forms, particularly if you want to be a government contractor, what kind of commitments you're making, what if people travel on business. The compliance issues are mammoth. We'll dig into those later, but this will, I would also say, just judging from the experience of being a visitor in places like Colorado, District of Columbia, which have fairly broad legalization, this affects life. This changes what it's like on the streets, and it will be interesting to see.
So the other thing you pointed out this morning that I think is really interesting, and this is law that we want to keep an eye on, because California sort of sets the trends that New Jersey seems to be following in terms of employment law protections. So California had last year passed this resolution AB 5 that made that defined what an independent contractor was within that state. And then they had like 25 exceptions to that. And so another exception now that was passed as Proposition 22 last night is another exception to the independent contractor law, which excludes Uber, Lyft, and the employees that are now independent contractors that work for them, and companies like DoorDash, Instacart, right, Postmates. They all got together and spent about $200 million on a lobbying effort to get this passed. And so now in California, you are not an employee if you work for Uber, Lyft, Instacart, or any of those gig delivery services or driving services, ride share or ride hailing services. You are now deemed to be an independent contractor. And I tell you, between Jason and I, we could talk about this until the cows come home. But you're going to watch for this. You're going to watch. In New Jersey, they had legislation that mirrored the California legislation. It hasn't gone anywhere yet. But with this, there may be, once the election is done, there may be a resurgence of looking to further limit what is defined as an independent contractor in New Jersey. And that is absolutely going to affect the way you do business.
Yeah, California was the first state to adopt mandatory anti-sexual harassment training, and a number of states followed suit. New Jersey is generally in line with that, although not by statute, but by court-made law. California passed restrictions on non-competes, which New Jersey hasn't quite gotten to. There have been a few attempts in the legislature to get there, and they have not succeeded. And now here's another trend out of California, although this one is arguably not pro-employee the way California's rules on non-competes and on employee training arguably are. But New Jersey uses the same ABC test, right? And in New Jersey, classification is a big deal, as we've talked about. So this is a fascinating trend.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because I think the old school thought process was that being classified an independent contractor is not helpful to the employee. It's not protective of the employee. But we find now in this gig worker economy that employees don't necessarily want to be classified as employees. Workers would rather, in some contexts, be classified as 1099s. So it provides them a whole lot more freedom, and it may fit what their objectives are. And quite honestly, some of the biggest concern was coming out of traditional gig workers like freelance journalists and artists and all of these people that typically work in a 1099 context. Now, if you have a visiting artist who is teaching at an art school under California's law, would be considered an employee, not a 1099 worker, which means the cost of employing that person just went up, which also means that either that means lower wages left over for the employee or this 1099 artist, or a desire by the employer to say, no, we're not going to hire you. We're not going to contract with you. So there's just, it's an area for small business to pay attention to.
Probably a good one for a future webinar.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last, and we can move on.
I was just going to say the other thing obviously happening in the news is coronavirus is not getting better; it's getting worse. Right. The numbers are clear, even in the states that had it under relative control, like New Jersey. The curve is starting to go up again. We're getting into higher numbers of cases per day, higher number of hospitalizations, and the national trends are very bad, and that is having an effect on businesses, and their effects that each of us have called out. For me, it's making sure you're aware that the governor issued an executive order. Governor Murphy issued an executive order last week on employee health and safety, mandating various health and safety standards for all New Jersey employers. So things that used to be in this industry or that industry, or used to be recommendations, now there's a set of protocols that is the law.
And he's actually
This is,
scheduled to announce more restrictions today.
yeah,
And these are going to be the general COVID restrictions, not employer specific. So, make sure that everyone who's watching sort of gets up to speed on those, because we are firmly back in the second wave.
yeah, I mean, we're gonna start to see dial backs on which businesses are open, I think. And I think we're going to see this around the country now that election day has passed, and people aren't worried about angering the electorate. We're gonna see, at least from states, kind of doubt it from the White House, but at least from states, we're going to see increased dial backs. So do be aware, if you're running a business, of these new protocols. You probably are already. It's very typical things about distance and sanitization, and contact-free payments and things like that, and also some training and support that the State Department of Labor is going to start to offer. But we're also starting to see the effect of rising virus on the litigation side, right?
Yeah. So I saw this morning that yesterday, a former employee of NBC Universal filed suit against the company, saying that she was terminated because she's Asian, right? So you're going to see the coronavirus suits claiming that the employer isn't doing enough to comply with OSHA. You're going to see those, and we've already started to see those. You're going to see the coronavirus suits talking about, listen, you failed to accommodate my high risk condition, or you fail to accommodate my desire to work from home during Corona. This is an interesting one.
Right. How about, I'm asking, I'm not telling. I could also imagine, you treated me as disabled because I asserted I was at a higher risk, right? And so therefore I fall within those protections.
Exactly. And I was perceived as contaminating the workplace, right? But I didn't. I did all of these responsible things. But this one is a particular note, because she is saying that she was a teleprompter operator and had 5 years at NBC Universal, was a great employee, all good performance reviews. And then when everybody went to work remotely, they took March and April to not give her the technology and the equipment that she needed to work remotely. They gave it to all of the other teleprompter operators who were not Asian, who were less experienced than her, had less time in the industry, and she was sort of the senior person there. And then they terminated her, and she's saying that it's because I'm Asian. Now,
so in other words, the president's rhetoric about the China flu,
right,
has now triggered grounds for discrimination suits by Asian Americans who may have been terminated during COVID.
So it's an interesting case. It's one I'll pay attention to, because I'm not sure it has merit. They may have, I'm not sure that she will be able to prove that the reason for termination, the discriminatory animus, was motivated by her being Asian, as opposed to some other legitimate business reason that companies often throw in the mix, right? Well, NBC Universal interestingly says, well, we just couldn't give her the equipment because we had run out of it and we didn't have any more. And she says, are you kidding me? You can buy this stuff over the counter at any electronics store, and you're telling me you didn't have the equipment to give me? So this is going to be an interesting one. What we're likely to see, Jason, is that that'll get settled and we'll never hear how it ended.
Right, and it becomes a risk and something you have to worry about without having the protection of law being actually made. One other quick current event, which I'll just note, is last Thursday, Friday, and Monday of this week were the days for businesses to actually go on and apply for grants under New Jersey's Phase 3 COVID relief program. I can say that the experience on Friday for micro businesses, which I was watching very closely, was fairly universally that a ton of businesses logged on at 9 o'clock, which is when the gates opened, and the computer system at the NJEDA just couldn't handle the traffic, and the sort of 10-page form wound up taking close to 2 hours because of the number of times the system would crash or kick you out. The system was just not really prepared for the load that it took. So that was frustrating for a lot of small businesses, and sort of added to the anxiety of the moment. But the EDA's position was, we're doing our best. B, we're not yet oversubscribed. That's what they said at 9:30 on Friday, or 10:30 on Friday. And now, businesses are waiting to see whether they get the grants. This was all for $5,000, and until Congress does something, probably, the last real grant money to come down. So on that note, where do we stand? So we set this topic, our grand topic of what the election means to small businesses. We said it a couple months ago. No one would be talking to you on the day after the elections and not having a clue really what the answer would be. And the answer is we still don't really, have a definitive answer. As of just to set the context for anyone who picks this up in the recorded version, as of this hour, it is the indications in the last few minutes are that all the votes are counted in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin will be awarded to Joe Biden. And it is more likely than not that Biden will be the eventual Electoral College victor. And it is more likely than not that the Republicans and President Trump's forces will blitz the courts with legal challenges to try to overturn that result on a variety of theories, which means we are in for a prolonged period of not knowing how exactly this is going to come out, and everything that means. So let's do what we can to put the politics aside and to not engage in the punditry you can hear elsewhere, and to talk about what this means to your business. Yisha, sort of top. I mean, there are a variety of points that I'm thinking about, but what's top of mind for you?
So top of mind for me is, as I woke up this morning and thinking about, well, the one thing the businesses don't like is flux, right? We saw an uptick in the stock market this week because there was sort of this positivity surrounding a potential Joe Biden win, right? I think some of that uptick was also positivity surrounding let's just get an answer on this already, right? We're this close to the election. We're going to be positive. We're going to feel good about this. And I think that is where it's at, right? So my perspective as I woke up this morning and was really thinking about how do I wrap my head around how I feel today, was I need to dig my heels in, put my head down and just get to work. Just work, focus on work. There's nothing ever that can be bad about that, right? Is just, paying attention to my business. If I'm not able to trust my emotions enough to do client work today, that doesn't mean I can't sit down and write some blogs or sit down and do that bookkeeping stuff that I've been putting off and that I clearly need to just have Elisa handle. There is a myriad of stuff that you can do today, but I say this with all possible hope that everyone will be gracious, everyone will be kind to their clients, to their vendors. Just stay focused on business. Be your professional selves. And ultimately, don't talk about politics in the workplace. Don't talk about politics with your vendors. You don't know who's on the other side of that phone. And when I say you don't know, you don't really know what's in their heart. And politics should have no place in business.
I saw something fascinating actually on Twitter today, and I go back and forth on my love-hate relationship with Twitter. But I saw that yesterday there was a joint press release issued by, and listen to this issued by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO.
Interesting.
along with the National Association of Evangelicals and an association of Black clergy. Okay, these are groups you do not expect to say anything together or in agreement, but they came out together, and what they said together was basically, we need to wait for every vote to be counted. That's the process. It's the normal process. Be patient. We all want to see, just be calm, and we'll count the votes and we'll see how it comes out. And Mark Fisher in the Washington Post said, when you see those kinds of people come together that to demand every vote be counted, you can sense the fear and the hope and the belief in the system that may still divide or may still unite a divided country. So I think, Ayesha, there is definitely that spirit afoot in most places, in the hearts of all but the most rabid partisans on either side.
Right.
It's like, let's let the system play out first, and we built it, and let's let it run.
Right. So
In
what do you
terms of business effect, the primary thing that stands out to me is I agree with you completely. I spent some time as a business legal journalist in my checkered career, and one of the things I learned that it really was a learning experience for me was, businesses, you sort of take the U.S. Chamber of Commerce position, and they always say, oh, well, we're against regulation and we're against this, and don't do that. But really what was at the heart of that is business hates uncertainty. Business hates change. This was what you saw after the Affordable Care Act passed, which was, once it was pretty clear that's where it was going, businesses kind of lined up and said, okay, that's fine. Let's just pass it and then we'll live with it. It's a system we can live with. We can budget around it. We can plan for it. We can set up our benefits programs. Now let's just keep it, please. Don't go fiddling with it, because we figured out how to budget and plan for it. And now we can go about our business. And so, unfortunately, I think for businesses, what we're going to see is a long continued period of uncertainty, of not really knowing what the future is going to bring. Are we going to have an aggressive COVID response from the federal government or not? They don't know. Are we going to get a relief program out of Congress or not? Yeah, I don't know. Congress looks like it's going to continue to be divided. The Senate's going to be close. So that is clearly going to be a result. I do think that the other thing that was really interesting in the last week was you saw indications that big business was not necessarily lining up traditionally with the sort of traditional Republican candidates. You saw Goldman Sachs make a statement about the election. You begin to see corporate leaders take a statement. As you said, the Dow rallied this morning when it looked like Biden was going to win the swing states. The sort of, because businesses are looking for that stability. For small businesses in particular, I have seen the point made, which I think is a good one, which is what's good for big corporate America, what may be happening, say, in the Supreme Court under its new vote count, is not necessarily what small businesses, and especially micro businesses and solopreneurs, want to see. That things that favor big corporations in terms of independent contractor relationships, in terms of tax preferences, and we see that now in the current tax bill, where the tax breaks for companies went to big companies. They did not go to pass through businesses, like so many of us on this webinar maintain, right? We didn't get that break. That pro-business thing that you will hear, say, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce talk about ain't necessarily what small business really needs. And I'm beginning to see that point made, and I think it's a good one.
So it was interesting. I saw, it was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and I think it was yesterday. No, it was the Washington Post.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about some interesting statistics in terms of what all business is looking at, right? And I think they're relevant here, because big business, small business, we're worried about taxes. We're worried about funding. We're worried about the forgiveness. And we're worried about labor, right? So 2.4 million Americans have been unemployed for more than 6 months, right? So that there's a whole sort of body of work done on the long-term unemployed and the effects, and long-term unemployed is considered unemployed for more than 6 months, and the effects that that has actually not just on their ability to get another job, because it is that 6-month threshold actually puts you into you are going to have a really hard time getting another job at the level you were at in the industry you were in, and you're going to have to start making adjustments. But there's a huge psychological and a psychosocial impact that we don't want to underestimate, right? So for a portion of that unemployment time, you were well compensated. Your unemployment compensation looked good. It doesn't look that good now. And as we round into this next wave, and if I don't know how long this next wave might last, if it's another 6 months or 8 months or until the vaccine is safely available, you're really looking at people who've been unemployed for a long time, a really long time period. And you're going to have to factor that in. Another factor they looked at is 6.1% decline in consumer spending, but on services. So goods were being bought, but services people were deciding, I'm not going to use that service. I'm not going to hire the CPA. Maybe I mow my own lawn, things like that. For us small businesses, that's a number to pay attention to, that there is a decline in use of services.
Right. If you're in the comfort business, maybe you're the so-called comfort economy, maybe you have some opportunities here. If you're in the healthcare economy, maybe you have some opportunities here. If you're in the tourism economy, good luck. And services are lawyers and accountants.
Right.
They're also, home cleaning and office cleaning services. I don't want somebody else in my office or in my house,
The other number that was interesting to pay attention to is those of us who are either in small businesses or who counsel small businesses or even medium-sized businesses of this nature, is there was a 6.4% drop in manufacturing output. Now, compared to around the world, that number is better than what other countries are experiencing, but we still experienced a 6.4% drop in manufacturing output, which means you have to think about the industries that's attacking, right? And that they've recovered. It used to be a higher drop earlier in COVID, but those are interesting statistics. And you think about what this means in the context of your hiring needs, right? You may be able to get actually very highly skilled labor cheaper than you thought you could. So that's something to think about. There's so many variables right now, but I think knowledge is power. So having all of these variables in your basket to sort of think about, okay, there is this really high rate of unemployment out there, which means that there are people out there who don't have the safety net of the enhanced pandemic unemployment insurance, who really want to work and who are extremely qualified. So, now may be a good time to hire.
Maybe an opportunity there.
Right.
Yeah, I think we know enough about the election now to know that we're not going to see bold action in any direction for the next 2 years. I mean, there was some possibility of this being a blue wave repudiation election with the same party being in control of both houses of Congress and the White House. That seems unlikely, and even if the Democrats did somehow still win the Senate, their majority would be razor thin. It seems more likely at this hour that the Republicans will maintain control of Congress. So whether you have a continuation of the status quo with a Republican in the White House controlling the Senate but not controlling the House, we have seen the level of action out of Trump and McConnell so far, and their appetite for bold action, or whether you have, say, Biden in the White House but Republicans still controlling the Senate, or a single vote sort of vice presidential majority in the Senate for the Democrats. None of those are the environment that will lead to bold action, that will lead to real different solutions. So for relief, I think this means for businesses and for small businesses in particular, the cavalry is not coming. Okay, we just have to face up to that. No one's coming to our rescue. The most likely relief bill to pass before the end of January, before the change in the administration, if there is a change in the White House, with the Republican proposal is more of the same. It's a little more PPP loans. Most of the small businesses I know were really disappointed with how those turned out. They don't feel it was worthwhile. They feel like it was a huge hassle for not much benefit, and that the benefit was locked into payroll, which wasn't really where they needed the dollars. It forced them to make artificial economic decisions. I've heard from a lot of businesses that have said, because of PPP, I wound up keeping on staff I wouldn't have kept on. I didn't buy the other things I needed to buy. I don't think small business, and here I'm making a distinction between, let's say, under 30 employees, under 50 employees, which are most of the small businesses, right? PPP, which is so payroll heavy, to me is just, has not been much of a benefit. So you may get some more PPP. Not the states are going to be limited in what they can do. Yes, we're in New Jersey, which is more aggressive, but that money has to come from somewhere. The state can't print it, and the federal government's not going to be handing a lot more over. Also, don't expect bold action on things like healthcare, on taxes, on climate change, maybe even on infrastructure. You would think you could get bipartisan agreement on infrastructure, but we haven't for the last 2 years. The Senate's just too close. And so, what you see is largely going to be what you get. We may get a change in tone at the top, and maybe less distraction out of the White House. That will maybe stop being a strategy, a deliberate strategy. But in terms of legislation that gets passed, I think we are where we are, and we have to be ready to deal with it.
Yeah, I think the big concern I have as a business owner is, we've been handing out money from the federal government and the state government. And what are my taxes going to look like this year and next year and the year after? Because like you said, we're not just printing currency. Someone is going to have to pay this back. And that's us. That's all Americans are going to be paying this back, right? It depends on which administration you're looking at. Biden's promised some kinds of tax changes in the tax code, in Trump's tax code. Trump clearly has no incentive to make any of those changes. Mm-hmm. So as a small business owner, you really have to think about, I didn't take the PPP loan or the EIDL loan. Like I know other solos did, other small businesses did, because frankly, I was at the time that all of these loans came out and that we were even eligible, there wasn't enough guidance on what the repayment was going to look like, mm-hmm. and what the conditions for forgiveness were going to look like. Now, in hindsight, I should have taken it maybe, but my perspective was also, I'm a little bit scared of the uncertainty.
We still don't know, like, are things I bought with PPP money deductible? Right. Can I still deduct those as expenses, or have I lost the deductibility? Is that going to be treated as income? Right. And I have to pay taxes on it. So it was all pre-tax money. We don't know these things yet. And another effect has occurred to me. And by the way, apologies from Elisa, who could not be with us today for happy reasons. But I'd love to have her answer to this. Something I probably should have seen this one coming, but I don't think it's unique for businesses, right? For businesses that had a good 2019, right? Now their estimated taxes are based on their 2019 revenue, right? But this is 2020 and revenues are down. But am I expected to meet that same estimate? I mean, I know if I know my taxes are low, I just have to meet what my taxes are going to be. But you still see things like that. Yeah. And by the way, the same thing with financial aid calculations, right? For those of us doing FAFSAs, our FAFSAs are based on 2019 income. 2020 wasn't that good. 2020 was fine, but it wasn't as good as 2019. And I think that's a universal experience. And so,
And that goes
everyone
back
is
to
sort
the
of
whole,
hurtling towards a wall,
right.
and we're going to be sort of muddling our way through it.
And this whole conversation, right, circles back to businesses don't like uncertainty.
Yep.
I like to know what I need to plan, what I need to set aside, and who I'm going to be writing that check to, right? And now I know that I have made my 2020 estimated tax payments based on 2019 income, and I'm just sucking it up and making those payments, right? And at some point, if there is a refund due or if there is more owed, we'll deal with that April 15th or whenever the next tax date is.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, with the objective of trying to stay positive and trying to say, maybe now's a good time to hire when I hadn't thought about hiring before. Or maybe in this new round of funding, since I've seen that there's a little bit more clarification on what those repayment conditions might be or the forgiveness conditions might be, if I borrow under 50,000 or under 10,000 as part of those grant programs, it's going to be a grant, not a loan. So now maybe the benefit of a second wave is that we've been through it once before, and that we generally have a sense, perhaps through the campaign trail and the debates, and ultimately whoever wins, we have a general sense of where they may be going with this. But I will tell you, we probably have more certainty in where the administration will go as if it's Trump's administration, because if it's Biden's administration with the razor thin sort of majority that we have in Congress, and I don't think that we're going to have a clear majority in the Senate, he's not going to be able to do much. And so it's 2 years until the next midterms of us not being able to do much.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also an exhausting thought.
And we could get slowed down on appointments to cabinet positions and everything else, because the McConnell approach has been just not to do things. That's just been foot dragging on things generally in an anti-regulatory philosophy.
And remember, he won his election.
Yeah, he won in Kentucky.
And remember that he's the guy with thousands of pieces of legislation sitting on his desk that he won't let through.
Right.
He gets to decide.
So I'm going to offer a sort of my closing thought about where we are in the entrepreneurial spirit of taking lemons and making lemonade. Let me try and build another argument we haven't talked about. One of the things we know is a result of this election is that we continue to have deep divisions in our populace, that we are just a strongly divided nation. There is a lack of consensus on a number of philosophical points. There is frankly a lack of consensus about how to even look at the world, what facts are, what is the difference between fact and opinion, and what the facts are. We are in a highly relativistic period. That is a real problem for business leaders. It's a problem for business leaders as you try to, for instance, set a culture in your company. If you believe in the power of culture to run a business, that is, the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. The power of culture, pretty hard to set a culture around shared values when as a population, it's hard to see where the shared values are. And so for things like culture setting, compliance programs, ethical leadership, the foundations, I think, are crumbling. The bedrock on which we would build that culture is falling apart. And as a nation, we have a lot of work to do to figure out what our shared values are we can tap into. That's a problem. The opportunity, I think, that comes out of both that division and out of relative inaction from Washington is, I think that this increases the importance of the role of the company as the community. And I think we may increasingly see, starting with big employers, sort of, and I actually think I'm seeing this already. And I think we saw this beginning with LGBTQ rights, for example, where companies stepped up and said, politicians aren't acting. We are going to set the community. We're going to say, in our community, this is how we act. If you don't like this community, go find a job somewhere else. But here in this company, these are our community values. This is the way we do business. This is how we approach each other. And the important part that's sometimes missing, I think, Ayesha, is, and this is how we take care of our own. And I think for business leaders who say, I will set a culture, I will provide what stability I can provide, I will set shared values and keep to them, we are the community. You could see real opportunities for people marching in the same direction, for growth, for real success in the recruitment market, and I think success in the commercial market, because what people are looking for is to be a part of a civil community. And if Washington can't set it, and social media won't let us set it in the broad context, then within our four walls, we can be your home. Does that ring true to you, or am I being a Pollyanna?
And this is why I love talking to you, Jason, because at first you're bright as all heck, but I love the positivity, because yes, on a day like today, when it frankly is bright and sunny outside, but it feels very dark here, I will tell you that that is exactly the sentiment I needed to hear. And so I want to thank you for that, because yes, if Washington won't do what it needs to do, then we as business owners need to do it. It's time to step up. That's fantastic. I love it.
Gosh. Well, I see from the digital clock on the corner of my computer, we're supposed to stop talking now, as much as we would happily keep going. But obviously we have fertile grounds for many more discussions, and our plan is to continue them. Our next episode of this podcast will be November 18th, where because of scheduling conflicts, I will be without either Ayesha or Elisa's company, and so that will be interesting. We will have some interesting guests for you. And tomorrow, the Women's Entrepreneurs webinar that you and Elisa put on continues. What's your topic for tomorrow?
So tomorrow, interestingly, we're talking about sort of handling holiday-related stress and sort of how to get through it with a little modicum of grace and not losing your cool completely. But
right, especially when it's going to be a disappointing holiday, I think, in terms of people not really being together the way they would like to be.
That's right.
So we'll see how that goes. One other plug for our participants currently ongoing is Princeton University's first Entrepreneurship and Innovation Conference called Engage 2020. If you just do a search, Princeton Engage 2020, you'll see information on that. It's free, and they want local entrepreneurs to show up for this virtual conference. So I recommend that.
So Jason, Victor Crane just added a question. He said, yeah, as an insurance consultant, how can I help nudge business owners to take action per your last comments? And I think that's a fantastic question. And listen, as an insurance consultant, you are providing the protection that business owners don't realize they need. And in fact, if you want to give them the example of lots of business owners turn away the EPL coverage, which is the employment practices liability coverage, and then you're going to pay me $500 an hour to litigate your case without any insurance protection and potentially get hit on a big judgment. Had you had the insurance protection, you would not need private counsel. They use big firm counsel. They pick up the tab on that, and they pay the judgment if you lose. So listen, there is no better argument for insurance at a time like this when there is such huge uncertainty in the marketplace. I hope that helps, Victor.
Yeah, and I guess my perspective, Vic, would be, just try to get across this idea that there's a real opportunity for employers here, as a result of the convergence of all these factors, to really get some great talent at good prices. One of the ways to do that is people are going to be looking for work. But another way is People are going to be looking for benefits, and I can think of local employers, one of which is a major university, that has done very well getting tremendous talent and not paying very good salaries because their benefits are fantastic, right? So that's always worked, but it works even better in this environment where you're counting on your employer to be your safety net because there's no other safety net to get. So between wages going down and the appeal of benefits going up, and then I would add the third, which is people just want a home. They want somewhere that takes that uncertainty away, and they feel like if things go even, to another layer of hell, someone will help me through it. And for the employers who will listen to that message, I think they have an opportunity to get not only a very talented workforce, but a highly loyal workforce.
Right.
And with that, we will end this PPP webinar for today. Ayesha, always a pleasure.
It's great.
Thank you so much. We could just keep going and going,
Yeah.
but we're gonna wait a couple weeks and pick it up again. To those of you listening, thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks so much. That was great.